Hello, friends, and welcome to this golf broadcast unlike any other. Yes, my friends, we are back. We have done it. This is Fairway Rollin, a golf program on the Ringer Podcast Network and on FanDuel TV. My friends, it is with a heavy heart that we approach this final major of the 2025 golf season. There is still yet some exciting major style golf to be had, not the least of which is the Ryder Cup at Bethpage, but it has been a tremendous run of majors. Speaking of tremendous run, I am joined by my tremendous pals, Nathan Hubbard, our PGA Tour boots on the ground, and of course, if it's a major, it's Justin Ray, coming to us plausibly live from Derry, North Ireland. Is that how you say it?
I believe so. I've only been here a few hours, and it's been an adventurous couple of hours, to say the least, as you can probably tell from the angle of the camera and probably the sound quality here. But we're going to fight through this. It's going to be a little bit, we've left our power adapter at the desk in Texas, and it's been a journey to find one in this small Irish town, going to about a dozen quaint little storefronts and coming up empty over and over again so far. So,
but this is it. This is authentic. This is true Open Championship. You step up when the conditions, get perilous, and this is exactly
when nature changes your plans. You just got to adapt.
That's it.
Well, it sounds like nature is already starting to change the plans there. Rory was out at 7 a.m. after not getting in until supposedly 1 a.m. to go get in 18, but I heard there was already a weather stop today, Jay Ray. Are we going to have some real proper open weather this week? What does it look like out the window?
I will say that wind forecasts in general are not super reliable a week out, especially in this part of the world. But it does look pretty promising if you're looking for that kind of rain, gloom and doom, proper open conditions, which I want. I'm here in person. I want to experience it all. I want it's July, and I want a rain jacket on, baby. Come on. So
well, you might have a turtleneck on too. The high is in the 50s for most of the stretch. I see some in the low 60s, but all of these days are not gonna. You don't see anything north of 65 on any of the forecasts so far.
And they're coming off of a really hot streak of weather here. I was told by multiple locals already about how warm it's been, and obviously you can follow the forecast and find that out. But that looks like it's going to change, and it's going to be probably going to be cold and wet. And the wind forecasts for the weekend are substantial right now, so we'll see if that holds up.
So let's jump right into it. We have been organizing our thoughts this major season in 2025 by beginning each show with who can really win this golf tournament. And it was a group of 4 or 5 guys that we've sort of been talking about. And we were in the ballpark at the Masters when Rory McIlroy won it. One of the panelists here selected Rory to win that golf tournament. Scotty Scheffler for sure was on our list when we talked about the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. I'm sure one of us had Scotty. I don't think any of us had JJ Spawn, but we did have.
I had that in my bag, man.
that one was not one we pulled out.
He did not appear on the show in our preview of the U.S. Open. But we did have several of the big guys, all of whom finished right around that top 10. Your Scotty Schefflers, your John Rahms, Rory even with the backdoor top 15. So, as is always the case, I will say to you guys right off the bat, my list has gone from maybe 4 or 5 guys down to 3. And
really?
Yes. And
wow.
Well, here's why, and we can start with this name right out of the box. I don't think Bryson DeChambeau can win this golf tournament at this golf course, Justin Ray.
What sort of history, Jay Ray, might he have that would suggest that he is non-competitive anytime he gets into this kind of a challenge of golf?
When the math problem doesn't have all the elements present, right? When it's moving variables and things like that. If you want to talk that kind of, parlance when you get to discussing Bryson DeChambeau. The big thing statistically for Bryson at the Open Championship is the putting numbers. Over the last 3 Open Championships, he's losing almost a stroke putting per round. Compare that to the other 3 majors in that same time span, he's gaining about a third of a stroke per round. So it's really been what's set him back at the Open Championship. His approach play has not been nearly as good at the Open compared to the other majors, but the putting has been the huge downside there. And he just really, he's never really, I think he has one top 10, top 20, one decent finish in his career, 8-9 starts. So, the numbers don't suggest that this could be something that he's going to, an environment where he could find success this week.
That's counterintuitive, though, isn't it? Because the knock on Bryson has been his ball flight is so high that it doesn't play well in these conditions. So to hear that it's actually been the putting, do you think there's...
Well, look,
he's
worse across the board. He's worse across the board in every category at the Open compared to the other three major championships. But just that the putting number really stands out, especially over the last 3 or 4 years.
I want to chime in with a couple thoughts just to sort of close the discussion on Bryson. To your point, JR, 7 Open starts, his best finish, his only top 25 was at St. Andrews in relatively manageable conditions. He missed the cut here in 2019, but in terms of the putting and the ball flight, there is kind of an interesting angle that I want to make sure that we sort of cover throughout. The Open Championship is notorious for slower greens, and I think that will definitely be the case this week at Portrush. There is great undulation in these greens. A lot of the defense of the golf course comes from the green complexes, which tend to sit up. So this is not going to be a golf course where you see a ton of bump and run, where you see guys, knocking it up to 30 yards and then letting the ball sort of run up, because it's just not feasible. So there is a requirement on approach to get the ball in the air. But what we're saying with Bryson is that the ball, it's too high. It makes itself subject to the variable of the wind. Is that our where we're landing there?
The wave of possibilities kind of opens up a little bit because the higher the ball goes, and that's kind of where you get a little bit more of bigger misses than maybe some players with lower, more defined, distinct ball flights.
House, I want to come back to your list because I want to keep walking through that. I'm so surprised to hear you say you think there's only 3 guys who can win this week. We've just talked about one of the Americans who's in the top 15 on the odds boards. There are only 4 Americans who are in the top 15, just like there were only 4 Americans who finished in the top 15 at the Scottish Open last week. To me, with the weather and the variables, I just keep thinking about Brian Harman wrapped in that raincoat, staying in his zone and his bubble, and just finding a way to grind through those conditions. To me, this feels like the kind of tournament that might open it up beyond 3. But can you tell us more about why you think this is we got to narrow the aperture of potential winners here instead of widen it this week?
Well, your point is right. And in fact, recency bias, it's exactly what just smacked us in the face at the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Like the variables that come into play when the golf course and the weather, take away kind of the superior skill element of guys that rank at the top of the list in strokes gained. What I mean by this idea that only 3 can win, we've been talking about the likely winner group, and 2 out of the 3 majors, we had winners come from the likely winner group, and that's really your point is absolutely on the money, and we're going to hit a bunch of names that I think would be perfectly reasonable guys to forecast to win this thing. But to me, the obvious leaders in the pack are Scotty and Rory and Jon Rahm, and I have a pronounced favorite amongst those 3. I really like one guy of those 3 more than the others, and we'll get there in due time. But Jay Ray, let's go ahead and move into those top 3. Did you take away good vibes from the Rory, with the short-haired Rory? Rory,
Shorn Rory,
the cleanly shorn Rory.
I think you can take nothing but good vibes out of it. Obviously, he didn't get over the finish line with the win, but all the numbers trending in the right direction. I think the thing that was most encouraging about Rory is that it was another example of him not relying on performance with his driver and still having a great week. I think he ended up between like 55th or 60th in strokes gained off the tee for the week, which is not where he resides, obviously, throughout his career, especially when he's really succeeding. But what that does is it speaks to just how complete of a player he's become this season. And we talked about that at the Players' Championship. We talked about it at the Masters, obviously. But his approach play is getting sharper. And this might be his best putting season of his career on the PGA Tour when it's all said and done. I mean, his numbers are outstanding. So I take nothing but positive vibes. And look, maybe he needed, after the emotional, everything that came with winning the Masters, the monumental achievement and the emotional and physical toll that took, you could obviously understand some letdown in the coming months. But Ryder Cup's around the corner. We're here in Northern Ireland at Royal Portrush. You can sense that, all right, the juices are flowing again, and this guy's not ready to just ride off into the sunset. Like he's going to be fired up and focused, and I expect a big week out of Rory.
Yeah, I heard two things from him this week that encouraged me, House. The first was he said the game is back to basically where it was when he headed into the Masters. And he's usually very open about the state of his game. So that, to me, sounded like, okay, we now know Jon Rahm had a pretty big hangover after he won that U.S. Open. I mean, it was a long one. If Rory's is, the better part of 3 months, that's a pretty good sign. Second thing I heard from him was not being a dick in the press conferences. and that to me says that emotionally he seems to be back in a place where he's more focused. He joked about PGA Frisco or TBC Frisco as a course that got a little bit picked up, but he was lighthearted about that. And when he talked about his haircut, he said it'll be the perfect length for the Ryder Cup. And Jay Ray, that's exactly what you just alluded to. I think he's locked in, knowing that he's got two events that he cares a hell of a lot about here. One is this Open in his home country. The other is going to be that Ryder Cup. So I generally take it well, House. The counter side, and this is what I want to hear from you on Rory. Quail Hollow was Rory McIlroy Country Club. And it was that performance there. I mean, there is a track record of Rory McIlroy with high expectations not meeting them over the last decade. Yes, he got through the Masters, but that was like childbirth trying to get that thing done. Painful. And lest we immediately assume that he only was failing at those other majors because of the weight of the expectations that would be all magically gone if he just won one. Where do you stand on Rory right now? I mean, I'm not sure that he completely transmogrified and shed his skin like a butterfly and is now completely unencumbered. Are you?
Well, here we are once again doing, strokes gained pop psychologist, right? We're like sitting in this chair and trying to read Rory's brain. Now, I do think that it was for sure the case that Rory arrived at Quail Hollow completely exhausted emotionally, physically, and it took only the tiniest thing to push him over the edge, which was the non-conforming driver result at the beginning of the week that included, the press saying, hey, we're going to talk about this. And that was it. He just was not, he had nothing left in the tank to sort of combat that thing. But I will say, for Rory, reminder, he shot 67 on Sunday at Oakmont. He did finish T6 at the Travelers. Like these are the moments where he's like, is he recharging? Where is he? Where's his head? He's this ornery dick in interviews, and then he just finished tied for second at the Scottish Open. And
with kind of a ho-hum week statistically, as Jay Ray laid out.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back. We have Scotty Scheffler to cover. We have Jon Rahm to cover, and we have a whole bunch of names that I'm very intrigued by. I've built up a beautiful card here on the FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll be right back and go through all of it. Okay, we are back. Boys, let's get to the other heavy hitters, starting with, if you don't mind, Scotty Scheffler, number one in the world in every ranking. You want to measure number one in the FedEx Cup, strokes gained total, strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach. He's number one, but he's never really gone into an Open Championship and just kicked ass. And he doesn't really love to play outside the United States. There isn't a lot of evidence of him playing abroad. and going out and grabbing golf tournaments. So how do we forecast his chances this week? Nathan, let's start with you. You're acting surprised. I mean, make the case for Scotty Scheffler.
He was first tee to green last week. He was yelling at the greens because he was 64th in putting and, doing the demonstrative freakouts that generally tell us he's not in the best mental headspace. But it's not like he wasn't striking the ball well or playing well. So I think Scheffler, maybe with the slowness of the greens, is going to do a little bit better. I like where his game is at the moment. I would have thought that if we'd seen some sort of mediocre performance from him this week, that you might feel that way. But we saw everything we needed to see stripe show tee to green. We just saw his frustration that he couldn't get the ball into the hole. That's been historically a solvable problem for Scotty.
So last year, when both Scotty and Nelly Korda were going on in their crazy runs, they drew a lot of parallels to each other, right? World number one, American, all the victories they were racking up. It was kind of an Annika Tiger or Lorena Tiger type thing from back in the day, a little bit going back and forth. What's crazy is that for both of those players this year, analytically speaking, they're both playing better this year than last, which
Amazing.
Is nuts to think about. Scotty, he's still, as you said, first in tee to green, first in strokes gained approach. He's having the best putting season of his career statistically. Last week aside, obviously wasn't great. But overall, he's been fantastic on the greens, much better than he has been in the past. And you can say this for Nelly. Nelly's actually like tee to green, like all the metrics are incrementally better than they were a year ago. It's just it's really hard to win golf tournaments, and circumstances happen. And last year she has a crazy finish to get into a playoff with Lydia Ko and wins the tournament. That could easily have been runner-up by 2 shots. It's just kind of the nature of the sport. So I think that's a kind of an interesting thing in the game right now, where the 2 number ones in the world are actually playing better than they did a year ago from an analytical perspective, but they just aren't racking up the victories like they did a year ago. I do not doubt Scotty Scheffler at all. I know he hasn't done it yet on a links setup in this type of venue, but I mean, he's not a stadium golfer. He's a guy who's won in all kinds of different grasses, and basically any question you asked of him, he succeeded. And by the way, he did win a pretty big tournament in Paris last year. So the Olympic gold medal was around his neck. I know he hasn't done it at the Open Championship, but for a guy who is, I think he's 92 under par in the majors since the beginning of 2020, about 40 shots better than anybody else. Scotty Scheffler is certainly at or near the top of my board. Not my pick to win. You'll get that later, but I do not doubt Scotty Scheffler's ability to get it done or have a big week going into here at Royal Portrush.
Nathan, do you have any particular observation with Scotty?
It's just that I saw what I needed to see last week. It's going to be about whether he makes putts this week. I think he's in great form heading into this. And I think, that if he had a hangover post PGA, it sure feels like the game is where it needs to be.
How many 12 to 15 foot birdie putts does Scotty Scheffler make this week? It's kind of where I'm at.
That sort of is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So, House, in hearing the way that you're talking about this, that means I have a sense for where you're leaning, but it sounds like you've got a richer dance card. I want to hear more about people outside of the big 3 who you're interested in. I mean, I'm just standing here looking at Justin Rose's performance this past week. He shot 7 under on Sunday, for crying out loud, slips himself inside the top. He finished solo 6 in Scotland. We got the report on Twitter from Michael Kim talking about how incredibly he was striking the ball. And suddenly I step back and look at him at plus 500 to top 10 and think, man, Rosie's showed up this year in a few of these majors. I could see myself leaning in on that. But I suspect you have some other guys who fall outside your big 3 you're going to tell us about.
Yeah, I don't mind Justin Rose at all. A tiny bit on a top 10 and a top 20, just so you have covered. Now, we did sort of on this show lean into him for a decent performance at Oakmont.
You want to punish him for letting us down?
No, I'm not petty that way. I mean, I'm except for I am 1,000% petty that way. It's exactly right. But I certainly recognize, under these circumstances and where his game is at, it's just really, really super impressive. But speaking of guys that have been impressive, I want to start first with a conundrum, and his name is Tommy Fleetwood.
I knew you were going there.
He really reflects
well. That's why I went Rose first.
He really reflects well. There are a lot of numbers that support Tommy Fleetwood, not just at this venue where he finished second in 2019, only to Shane Lowry, but his game, directionally, we saw it at the Travelers. He was right there.
That's exactly right. We saw it. He was right Travelers.
There. And we're not on U.S. soil. Most important distinction. We're not on U.S. soil for time. Justin Ray, what do we do with Tommy Fleetwood?
Top 10 finishes without a win graphic. Oh, my God.
What a career.
Dana Quigley getting so much airtime from being second on that list. I'm bullish on Tommy this week. Excellent links player with a lot of back history playing on these types of golf courses. You mentioned success at the Travelers Championship. That's a course where power isn't necessarily something that's very important because it's kind of a shorter golf course. Tommy, not the longest guy on tour, hits it plenty far, but it's not one of his overwhelming strengths. Look, he's got the arrows pointing in that direction. I think he'd be an immensely popular major champion, obviously. He would get a ton of crowd support on the weekend if they'd turn him into the hometown guy. And he would be incredibly popular at Royal Portrush if he's contending on the weekend. I got to see it to believe it type thing when it comes to winning the golf tournament, but I am absolutely betting on him to finish in the top 10.
Oh, I love this. Okay, top 10. Top 10, Tommy.
It scares me in this regard. Since the Masters, he's had 2 T4s, he's had a T2, he's had a 7. He last week had a T34. But the majors,
yeah.
He missed the cut at the U.S. Open. He was T41 at the PGA Championship. He was a humble T21 at the Masters. Not bad, but he putt like poop. I don't think he's really brought it in these high-intensity situations, House. And I want him to win. I want him to win a golf tournament as badly as I wanted Rory to win the Masters emotionally. And he's also showing us that it just may not be in him in these settings.
I do think there's a pretty distinct departure from the venues that the majors were competed at. Obviously, the Masters is the Masters, but Quail Hollow and Oakmont compared to this place, I really feel like this place just suits him.
For sure.
It's like a fit that plus 250 for a top 10. Let's be satisfied with that. And then if something crazy happens, we'll live bet it and we can all, celebrate the Tommy experience, Jay Ray. Is that a good plan?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Course fit, he's right there. You mentioned it, so much of the narrative for Tommy, and deservedly so, is not getting over that last hurdle and getting the victory on U.S. soil or getting the major championship. Then the guy go 5-0 in a Ryder Cup. Like, it's not like he can't play in pressure situations.
Yep.
I think it's more of a. I've told you guys over the years on this podcast, I'm more of a. If you keep putting yourself in position over and over again, you're going to break through. I tend to lean that way instead of, this guy can't do this, because we've seen it happen so many times where players eventually, get over that wall, whether it's Sergio Garcia at the Masters or, countless other examples over the years. So I'm not going to pick him to win this week, but man, I still feel like it's coming. I still feel like a major championship is coming. And, he's, like I said, he'd be an immensely popular champion if he didn't get it done.
I have 3 guys that I want to bounce off of you, and I put them all in this same kind of category. I'm going to call it teases or true dogs. And this is a recency bias. I'm confessing it right up front. The names are Tyrrell Hatton, who had every chance in the world to win the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Victor Hovland, who's been starting and stopping all season, but we are seeing a trend line in terms of certain attributes that like is starting to get me a little excited.
67, 67 last weekend. I liked it.
That's a trend line. And then Robert McIntyre, who, yes, came up flat at the Scottish, but that performance at the U.S. Open was legit, and he made his Open Championship debut at this venue in 2019 and finished T6th in his Virgin British Open. So those three names are guys that, for like any one of them winning, not a surprise in any way, shape, or form for me. I will be finding ways to get them in my top 20 and top 10 finishing positions for sure. What are your numbers showing on those guys, Jay Ray?
So I'll give you a number for Victor Hovland. Obviously, the most bemoaned aspect of his game is his play around the greens. Since 2013, the average field rank for winners at the Open Championship in scrambling is like 3.6. Everybody's been 7th or better. Each of the last 11 Open champions has ranked top 7 for the week in scrambling. You compare the average rank in the other majors over that same time span, and it's like 13.5. It's pretty definitively different in terms of you've got to eliminate mistakes around, and a lot of that comes from being around the greens, successful around the greens. Something to keep in mind with Hovland. Now, I know his best Open Championship came in the most docile conditions at St. Andrews in 22. It's not going to be like that this week. Not that he can't succeed in those more difficult conditions, but just the number.
I just want you to know.
Yeah,
he was 76th around the greens at Renaissance Club this past week. So it's not like he's dialed in right now with the wedges around the greens.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I would causes me to lean a little bit away and from Hovland is the significance there in terms of around the greens. McIntyre is interesting to me. I think that coming off the win, defending his title at the Scottish Open, that's a big pressure cooker of a week. That's a hard week for him. Tough to get a really super accurate snapshot of your play there in a tournament that obviously meant just an immense amount to him. Going back there to defend. But yeah, you mentioned I was really bullish on him just looking at what he did that first debut appearance at Royal Portrush in 2019, where virtually, unless you were up at 2 a.m. watching the DP World Tour, was kind of an unknown at that time. But yeah, another place where the form in the major championships, especially recently at the U.S. Open, was great. I'm thinking about it a little bit more, and I'm pretty high on Bobby McIntyre this week. Won't pick him to win, obviously, but I'm high on him as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna be cautious with him because it's kind of all or nothing with him. He missed the cut at the Masters, and it really hurt my feelings. I had him in a lot of different combinations, and I really thought it was a nice setup for him. That lefty action at the Masters. Okay, let's talk about Terrible Tyrrell, who I think I would not be surprised one iota if he comes out and wins this golf tournament.
As it goes with Hatton, going into the U.S. Open, I was a little hesitant to really go in heavy on him because he just hadn't had a ton of success in major championships in recent years. So that was kind of a big breakthrough type week at Oakmont to have him in the mix and contention. It was the first time he'd done that in several years. Really interested to see if he could keep that momentum, keep that form going, because obviously we know he's got the talent through the bag and the bounced statistics to where, he can perform on any golf course all over the world, especially when it gets difficult. Think about how successful he's been when it's been really tough, places like Bay Hill and other difficult setups around the world throughout his career. So something to look for if maybe we get some super blustery conditions and Mother Nature takes hold here.
Yeah, I will make a quick observation, and I'm sorry, Nate, just a quick interjection. You mentioned Bay Hill. There has been some corollary. I've seen Pat Mayo did this. He said that he liked the idea of looking at guys that performed well at PGA National, where the wind always kind of has an impact, and you see a lot of the names of guys that have played well in Open Championships appear on the same level of success at PGA National, and that corollary I think applies.
So you're telling me Keith Mitchell, first round leader?
That's exactly. If
this
only
Thursday.
Yeah, if only. He's the new Charlie Hoffman at Augusta. But how's the question that we've always had about him is shots gained between the ears. And I actually became more of a believer at the U.S. Open because he was pretty darn hard on himself, but he hung in there down that stretch. And that told me that maybe there is a way for him. He obviously has the game. I mean, he won at Dunhill at Dunhill Links in October. So he's got the shot shape. He can play the shots. It's really been about whether mentally he can keep it together. And maybe there's a world in which he can be as hard on himself as he is and hang in there down the stretch of a major to hold on. I just don't love it for the win for that reason. I just think it is an impediment. At the end of the day, it fuels him in some ways, but to win the big one, I feel like he's going to have to find a way, in the way that Rahm did, to fuel and funnel that self-criticism and that inner rage into more productive outputs on the course.
The thing I liked was he went from that U.S. Open performance to the live event at Dallas and damn near won that thing. So that showed, like, because I think those were kind of different venues, the Oakmont and Merido. But I really believe that the moment that we'll see him, holding a major championship trophy, it just, my mind's eye sees him across the pond. Yes. This kind of experience. That's right.
I think that's fair. I want to make sure that we cover a couple of other guys' house that are sitting there at the top of the board, but that you and I have danced around a bit over the course of the year. And I want to hone in on three, and that's really Ludwig, Morikawa, and I want to talk about Xander. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on Morikawa because he looks lost to me. The caddy situation, I know he's going to be out there with Billy, who's won on the bag at a major with Fitzpatrick, but I just feel like he missed the cut last week. He just seems to be searching. I don't know, J. Ray, if you think there's any reason for optimism on Morikawa statistically right now. When we started this at the Masters at the beginning of this year, you were talking about how insanely great his statistical season was, and it just seems to have flushed. Any reason to not sort of write that one off this week?
Yeah, he's a different guy now than he was earlier this season. You laid it out perfectly. I'm in your camp in terms of the caddy situation and just everything that's kind of circled around him. Whether it's the weird back and forth with the media and I just, from an analytical perspective, he's just not somebody I'm bullish on this week. In terms of being able to get out of that funk.
Well, so then I
miscut at Scotland.
Yeah, just 4 over, just didn't do it. So then I turned to Ludwig, who has tied Joe House in knots over this season, because after the win at Torrey, he just has not been the same guy, and it's felt like, was there an injury? And the reason that it's tied Joe in knots, because last year there was a knee injury, very clearly, that was not really publicly talked about, that seemed to be contributing to a consistent pattern of Sunday fades for Ludwig. This year, it's just been just a sort of uninspiring moment. And then, of course, he comes out in Scotland and he plays really good golf, finishes T8, and you start to think, geez, I saw 65 in there on Friday. I saw really good ball striking. I saw all the things. This is a guy who, in our mind's eye, because he looks the part, is going to win multiple majors. This really hasn't been the season for it. And so it's why I'm so surprised to see him sitting there at 28-1, maybe 6th on the odds board. What do you make of Ludwig right now?
The one number that I lean on here with Ludwig, I know his major championship career has been brief. He hasn't played in very many. But you look at what he's done at Augusta National, 2 starts, 2 top 10 finishes, putted brilliantly. I think it was gaining a shot and a half on the greens per round in those 8 rounds of the Masters. Every other major he's played in, 5 starts, 4 missed cuts. And his putting numbers are about a stroke. He gains about a stroke less per round than he does at Augusta National. So it's a small sample size, but I think you lean towards maybe Augusta National is just an amazing course fit for him. And then this other statistic kind of leans into that fact too. He is first on the PGA Tour this season in average proximity from the fairway, and like outside the top 40 from the rough. It's a pretty. He's gotten better at his proximity from the rough as the season's gone along. Now, I think when you get to an Open Championship, I know you can get the tall fescue from time to time, but there are ways to kind of mitigate and navigate. The rough is not, some places not as penalizing if you can, or just off the fairway. So that gives me that, and what he did last week lead me in a more positive direction. But I need to see it at a major championship venue that's not, that's not Augusta National.
As is our way, we have some sleepers to cover. Now, I have a list of guys that I'm not sure fit that sleeper category, but they're names that might not jump to front of mind. But let me turn the microphone over to you, J. Ray, because you always come up with a couple names, and I have some names I want to bounce off of you, and I'm sure Nate's got some down the list names as well.
So I have an overarching theory for our friends listening, and that's when it comes to the Open, do not be afraid to make a deep dive and fire on a first-round long shot. Let me present you some of the names near the top of the leaderboard in recent years after the first round. Amateur Christo Lamprecht. I don't know if you remember the Brian Harmon year. Was
big hitter.
I mean, year in, year out, we see guys come from basically out of nowhere. I remember, I think a first-round bet on Chris Gotterup. Every year I would come here, I would bet first-round leader on the guy who won the Scottish Open, simply because the carryover over and over, and I won some money there. Like, I remember Brandon Stone came off of a win in the Scottish Open. That was probably like 2016, maybe 2015. And then the following week came out, opened up really hot, had a great start, ultimately faded away. But don't be afraid to fire on a first-round leader is what I'm trying to say, because you can look through the years at some of those names at the top of the leaderboard after round one of the Open, and, don't be afraid. Take a long shot or two. So it's more of an overarching a theory that I wanted to share, and maybe, hey, why not? Why not say if Chris Gotterup stays hot, goes out and shoot 65 in round one? You're not saying he's going to win the tournament, but, why not take him as a first-round leader?
Love that. Okay, now a couple sleepers that might help build up bankroll finishing position-wise. Nate Dogg, go down your card. Let's go ahead and get into some sleepers. We got J. Ray's guidance on a first-round leader bet. What about your sleeper card?
Yeah, I'm looking at a few guys who've been sort of hanging around the hoop on leaderboards lately. I'm looking at Harry Hall, who played really well this past weekend. Saturday, he shot 74. That sort of took him out of contention, but he had a 64 on Friday, 67 on Thursday. He's been very much in the mix of late, and he's pretty far down the odds boards. I also sat there and looked at Andrew Novak, who is, he's 220 to 1 to win this week. Okay, fine, but you're going to get a decent top 20 for Andrew Novak, who is hanging around on the outside of that conversation about our Ryder Cup team, which it may not bode particularly well for the U.S. at the moment, but that's where he is right now. I also loved what I saw from Marco Penge last week. And there's a lot of conversation around this kid and how he's hitting the ball right now. I think he's going to be feeling at home if you're making a momentum play. T2 with a 66 on Sunday feels pretty good coming out of Scotland for that first round leader type
Love
bet.
that.
And then lastly, as we talk about the Ryder Cup, Nikolai Højgaard was T4 last week, and he shot a 64 on Sunday. And this is a guy who was on that last Ryder Cup team. He has not played as well as Rasmus right now. Rasmus is in, Nikolai's probably out. But another performance like he had at the Scottish Open, and you got to start taking him pretty seriously. So I don't mind that kind of a momentum play. Again, thinking either about first round leader or maybe a top 20 for a guy who at least is playing right now like he's pretty locked in, House.
So just to share with everybody, if you're interested in doing some of that first round leader, Gotterup is sitting there at 70 to 1. Marco Penge is available at 100 to 1, and Nikolai Højgaard sitting there at 90 to 1. I think I'm going to play all three of those. J. Ray, talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking on the sleeper card.
I mean, it's like I said, it's that first round leader is something that I've always shot for when you get a hot player coming off a great week at the Scottish Open. Same type of golf course most of the time, same kind of, you're in this part of the world already. It just feels like a shorter transition going from the Scottish Open. You've got a great week and you break in and play at the Open Championship.
Jay Ray, I have pulled together some names and some finishing position plays that I want. I'm looking at two names in particular. I'm looking at Russell Henley, who has been on an absolute heater this season in terms of high finishes at very hard events. He's coming in off of 3 straight top 10s. All of them majors or signature events. He has 5 top 10s in signature events. He finished tied for 10th at the US Open. All I'm looking for out of him is a top 20 kind of play. And the other guy that I really like in this same kind of category, 2 wins this season on tour, Ryan Fox. I love Ryan Fox, tied for 16th at this particular golf tournament and venue in 2019. He has an Irish Open win under his belt. And so both of those guys to top 20 are on my dance card, and I might do some combinations here. But Russell Henley top 20, Ryan Fox top 20. Those are 2 of my favorite bets on the board.
House, absolutely love both of those names, Russell Henley and Ryan Fox. You mentioned the links win for Ryan Fox. We'll start with Henley, though. When he got that victory at Bay Hill and he was up around 6, 7, 8, 9 in the world, you kind of had to take a breath and say, wait a second, this feels like this is some new age OWGR product where the guy shouldn't be up that high. And then you kind of take a step back and look at the resume he's assembling this season with the top finishes and all these good events. Maybe not winning a ton, but he does have one big victory, and then just consistently putting himself in the mix. And then analytically speaking, you look a little bit under the hood, and the numbers are even more promising. So if you're going into it with a top 20 type expectation, I think that's a brilliant value for Russell Henley. And Ryan Fox, one of the more underrated players on the DP World Tour the last 4 or 5 years. Guy can obviously hit it a mile. Not sure how much of an impact that extra power is going to have this week, but never hurts to have a little bit of extra in the chamber there. Look, I wouldn't be surprised if Foxy had a big week. He's been playing some of the best golf of his career here over the last 2-3 months. And he's obviously, as you mentioned, has had some good Open Championship success. So, let's see if we can get some double play action there with Fox and Henley.
Yeah, individually, Fox is 3-1 plus 300, and Russell Henley is a little better than 2-1 plus 210. So if you want to combine them, it's a little bit better than 11-1 on just top 20 finishes out of 2 guys that have been kicking ass and taking names this season. Fellas, we've reached that moment.
I'm shaking my head already.
Why? We've reached that moment. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we have to talk about who's going to win the Open Championship at Portrush. All right, birdie buddies, my eagle enthusiasts, my par-saving pals, we have reached that moment. Nate Dogg, who is going to win the 2025 Open Championship?
Well, the person that I think you two are about to just fawn over for the end of this show. So that means, listen, my heart says Justin Rose. I really liked what I saw from Rose this week. And it feels like maybe a week where one of the non-traditional guys wins. When you combine in the weather, I can find little flaws in each of the players at the top. If you made me go pick the winner outside of Rose, I'd tell you I think Scheffler's going to figure out the putting this week. I really do. But I didn't love what I saw from him screaming at the ball on the green. That is generally a no bueno indicator for Scotty. It means he's going to finish 8th instead of 1st. So let me just go with the heart and say Justin Rose.
Awesome. Love it so much. Available on the FanDuel Sportsbook.
I love the effort there, man. Sticking the neck out.
Yeah, absolutely. He's available.
I will say too. No, and I have to. I think I'm morally and contractually obliged to say this for any Open Championship. No major championship favors the veteran player like the Open. By far the highest average age over the last 10, 15 years of winners when you compare the 4 majors.
And he's down on the board, beneath names like Brooks Koepka and Patrick Cantlay and Jordan Spieth, names that didn't make an appearance on this show because none of them have a chance of winning this golf tournament. It will be very funny if one of those guys wins this golf tournament, and everybody can send
Jordan
this clip.
Spieth, 11 straight made cuts. That's
Oh, good. Let's bet him to make the cut.
I just had to get that number in.
That's a great bet.
Many numbers I had to squeeze in.
This is my way of us not having a three-way, session on John Rahm. So over to you, boys.
Well, Justin gets first dibs on John Rahm because he has the numbers that really support the John Rahm case.
Best player at the Open Championship over the last 4 years. He's the only player to finish in the top 10 3 of the last 4 years at the Open. During that span, best cumulative score to par, top 5 in strokes gained tee to green. He leads in bogey avoidance in that stretch, far and away among qualified players. That's the number I like the most when it comes to Rahm and predicting success on a links golf course. Lots of success on these types of golf courses in the past. I know in the last couple of years with him on Live, we haven't seen him play in some like the Scottish Open, and we haven't seen him as much. But you look at that stretch between like 2017 and 2021, and he was the best player in the world on these types of golf courses. I'm all in on John Rahm to get his first Open Championship and get leg number 3 of the Spanish Career Grand Slam.
I am unsurprisingly in lockstep with Justin Ray. It was deliberate that we didn't mention John Rahm at the outset of the show because I knew for sure that I was going to be talking about him in the context of this portion of the show, which is to win the golf tournament. I saw everything I needed to see at the U.S. Open, to be honest with you. I thought that he really showed a control of his game, especially on Sunday. If he had just been a tiny bit closer, I really think that he could have gone out and grabbed it. 2 Irish Opens. Let's just put that in the mix also. Loves playing in this mix. And yeah, in a season where top dogs plus JJ Spawn have gotten across the goal line, I think he is the top dog, and I like a top dog to win this week, fellas.
JJ Spawn, by the way, 1 putt away from winning a Players in the U.S. Open this year. So
yeah,
respect on my man's name.
I first round leader. Let's bet. Make sure everybody gets a little down on JJ Spawn.
I got her up, baby.
We missed the cut.
Well, you have to sprinkle it. These are all like, quarter of a unit bets when you're playing first round leader. But reminder to everybody, low scores are possible at this venue. Shane Lowry won this golf tournament by shooting 63 on Saturday. He shot 72 on Sunday, but that was just a victory lap. He was just walking around high-fiving everybody.
He still won by like 6 or something.
6,
5,
yeah.
So.
That's right. Well, there you go, my birdie buddies, my par saving pals, my eagle enthusiasts. So happy to be back here on Fairway Rollin. Nathan and I will have some thoughts midweek. There'll be a clip that appears on the Ringer Gambling Show feed, podcast, and on FanDuel TV that'll run Thursday morning. But overnight, Wednesday into Thursday, you want to hear our thoughts on what we're seeing over the course of the week. We'll have a little bit better information as the weather forecast shapes up. And then, of course, we will be back on Sunday with the recap of this tournament, and we'll all revel in the greatness of John Rahm together. Until then, my friends, please let's hit him straight out there.